So today we're going to talk about factoring a trinomial, part 2, and this is going to bring up special cases when talking about x squared plus bx plus c. Go ahead and set up your notes, factoring, Unit 5A, Homework 3 with the appropriate date, and make sure you set up questions, comments on the right-hand side of your paper before beginning. So now we want to determine the product of the binomials below. So once again, we see that when we FOIL or box method, we get x squared minus 2x minus 15. And this is going to be a little different because you notice I'm not going to have addition. We still have the same patterns, however. We know that negative 5 plus 3 will give me a negative 2, which is my b value. And negative 5 times 3 still gives me my c value. So the patterns are still the same regardless of the signs that you see in the expression. Here's another example of x minus 1 times x minus 6. Once again, it gives me x squared minus 7x plus 6. And as we look at those patterns, we're going to notice not too much changes. We still have negative 1 plus negative 6, which does give us a negative 7. Our b term, and negative 6 times negative 1, which gives me a positive 6, which is my c term. So the patterns are still holding true, we just have to be careful of our signs. Take a moment, pause, copy before continuing on. So one of our examples we want to talk about is when b is positive and c is negative. So here we have x squared plus 6x minus 27. Steps are still going to be the same. We're going to identify the factors of c, and c is 27. So we're going to start with 1 times 27 and 3 times 9. And those are our only factors for 27. Now something we have to be aware of is that one of our factors has to be a negative. One positive, one negative. That way when I multiply it gives me a negative 27. But they're still going to have to add to give you b. So I want to try different combinations. If I try 3 plus negative 9, it gives me a negative 6. And when I look at my b term, it needs to be a positive 6. So that's not going to be the combination I'm looking for. When I do negative 3 plus 9, however, that does give me a positive 6. So that's the combination. So once I have the right factors, negative 3 times 9 gives me a negative 27. Negative 3 plus 9 gives me that positive 6 for my b term. I want to go ahead and write the binomial using these two factors. So I'm going to start with x plus a negative 3 and x plus 9. Now I do want to go ahead and simplify this so I don't have a plus and negative here. And that gives me x minus 3 times x plus 9. And then I definitely want to check my binomials to see if they'll give me my original x squared plus 6x minus 27. So x times x gives me x squared. X times 9 gives me 9x. Negative 3 times x gives me negative 3x. And then finally, negative 3 times 9 gives me negative 27. Combine my like terms, 9 minus 3, and I get x squared plus 6x minus 27. Now, keep in mind, the other possibility is that the value of b might be negative when the value of c is negative. And that's when this scenario would work out better. So you always have to pay attention. If c is negative, b can either be positive or negative, depending on what number you go with. Take a moment, pause, copy before continuing on. So a second example that we want to talk about is what happens when the value of b is negative, but the value of c is positive. So here we have x squared minus 14x plus 48. We want to start with what the factors of c are. So we're going to take 48 and break it down into factors. We're going to have 1 times 48, 2 times 24, 3 times 16, 4 times 12, and 6 times 8. My next factor would have been 8 times 6, so that caps it. So here's all my factors that multiply to give me 48. I need factors that will give me 14. Now, because 48 is positive, I either had to multiply 2 positives or 2 negatives. Because b is negative, I have to add or multiply 2 negatives. So which factors give me 14 when I add them together? So I know 6 plus 8 gives me 14. And I know negative 6 plus negative 8 would give me a negative 14. But a negative 6 times a negative 8 gives me that positive 48. So my factors would be a negative 6 and a negative 8. So I want to take those two factors and I want to write my binomial product. I'll start with x plus negative 6 times x plus negative 8. And then I want to go ahead and simplify the plus negative, and it would be x minus 6 times x minus 8. Now we definitely need to check this. So x times x gives me x squared. X times negative 8 gives me negative 8x. Negative 6 times x gives me negative 6x. And negative 6 times negative 8 gives me the positive 48. When I simplify my like terms, I get x squared minus 14x plus 48, which checks with my original. Take a moment, pause, copy before continuing on. So here's our try it out section, 1 through 4. You're going to factor. And once again, keep an eye out for the signs. That'll help tell you whether to look at example 1 or example 2 to help you solve. And then number 5 is a word problem with a picture to help you figure out what's going on. Go ahead and take a moment, try these out before moving on to the answers. So here are answers. Once again, if you had problems getting any of these answers, make sure you bring questions or comments with you when you come to class next. See you next class.